As you can see, I'm having this thing loaded up onto a tow truck because today I'm bringing it into a shop to have it dyno tuned. Basically the idea is to strap this thing to an actual dyno so we can put a custom tune on it to make sure this thing's running as best as it can be and making the most power. I considered trying to do this myself, but it is pretty complex to tune a car. And also, I am taking this thing on a road trip here pretty soon, where I'm gonna drive, thousands of miles. And I am gonna drag race it as well. So obviously, getting the most power out of this thing is really important. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this thing runs and what kind of power it makes on the dyno. All right, just getting it set up on the dyno now. Getting the rear tires lined up. Man, I'm excited to see what kind of power this thing makes. All right, they got her all strapped down, and they got some initial setup done on the ECU. So far, he said the setup is going okay. He did mention the oil pressure, and he noticed it was kind of low. It certainly seems to get a lot lower when the car heats up, so I'm a little bit concerned about that. We're gonna try some heavier weight oil in here, maybe that'll help. And I think pretty soon here we're gonna maybe try for a full dyno pull. All right, well, we're back home. A little bit of bad news about the tune. So I have a little bit of an oil pressure issue with this thing. Seems like it has good pressure when it's cold, and it also has good pressure when it's revving, anywhere past like around 1,000 RPM. So like 1,100, 1,200, that's when it starts to pick up, and it actually rises pretty quick, and it has good pressure. But when you just kind of drop the, the idle back down to whatever it sits around like 700, 800, it does start to drop pretty low. It gets around, sometimes it sits at around 15 PSI, and it'll drop down to like 10 and even a little bit lower, maybe like 9 PSI. I think he said he saw at one point. And I know that the rule of thumb is, 10 PSI for every 1,000 RPM. So maybe that's normal, but the tuner wasn't comfortable running at that PSI. So and I'm not either. I want to see, 20 PSI at idle or something like that, or, something a little bit better. So they did offer some advice about that. And their opinion was that there's probably a pinched or a cut oil pickup tube O-ring. And I know that that's sort of a common thing. I probably could have been a little more careful when I installed that thing. And so that's what I'm looking at. I don't want to, do a dyno test, or I definitely don't want to be driving somewhere and this thing, throws a bearing or whatever, blows up the engine. That would be terrible. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this oil pan off. I'm going to replace that O-ring. And I also did buy an oil pump. I'm pretty sure that the oil pump is okay, but there's a chance that it just died kind of, for no reason. But yeah, this has got to be fixed. So it's kind of a bummer. A little bit of good news about the dyno test though. So I did have some pretty dark spark plugs when I first started this up with the, what I put on as like a base map, and it idled, it revved up, it idled, it actually cruised around the block, and it wasn't too bad, but there was definitely something amiss. It didn't run great. And I did my best to eyeball the air fuel mixture and make sure it wasn't going crazy either way, but he did actually spend about 20-30 minutes kind of just setting up that base map a little bit better, and it did run a lot better. And I was a little bit worried about possibly, maybe I noticed like a little bit of a misfire, or I was kind of, I was a little bit paranoid. But the good news is that actually he said that there really weren't any issues, and it ran pretty good, and everything seemed to be connected and plugged in and working properly. So that's sort of a little bit of a silver lining, I guess, as they say. I'm going to jack this thing up, and we're going to take off that oil pan. All right, well, so I got the oil pan pulled off. I have the pickup tube pulled off, and I've kind of been studying this setup. Well, first of all, this O-ring looked good. So I don't think that any sort of like pinch or twisted or cut O-ring was the problem with my oil pressure. So the first thing I did was go out and buy the high pressure Melling oil pump just to cover that base. I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. As annoying as it is to pull out that front timing cover. So of course I pulled off this tube, and this is the Mylodon tube. So, this is the tube that matches the oil pan that you buy from Mylodon, and for some reason, some are black, some are gold. I got one of the black ones, and you kind of have to match it to there. You can't, the stock one, which is right here, of course, is way too long. It sucks up the oil from like the back of the oil pan. There's one thing about this tube that really bothers me, and that's that this pickup area here, let me see if I don't know if you can see it, but it's not perfectly round. I measured it with my caliper, so I basically just put this on the edge there. So I'll put that on the place where the O-ring is going to seal on the oil pump itself. And you'll see 8.7, and as I spin this around, at some point it gets down to like, there you go, 8.48, 8.47, and then back up, boom, all the way up to like 8.9 at one point, I think was the max. Let me see if I can get it. Yeah, there you go. You get the idea. 8.95, all the way down from 8.4. So this is 0.05 inches. I don't know what that is, that thousandth or... and I told exactly that to the machine shop, and he seemed to think that was a little bit too much. So that's going to squish this out of round, and the pressure, it's going to be higher pressure where it's taller, and like lower pressure possibly, or not pressure, but the seal is going to be better, here and less here, and you want a good even seal around. So I called Mylodon and I said, hey man, like I think I have a defective pickup tube here. I think that, this got bent, and I don't know, I was thinking maybe that it got dropped or something, but they said, oh no, like these are not perfectly round, they all have some sort of variance. They're, as he put it, oblong sometimes. And he said that the seal was not achieved by this inner, edge, but that this kind of just goes into the O-ring, and that this flange here seals to the oil pump there. And you can actually, and he said, quote, you can actually see the O-ring squish this way, or that, you insert it and it kind of, you have to push down on the O-ring. And, So I went out, I bought this, luckily I found this around here, I didn't have to order it online, and I figured, hey, let's check that theory out by inserting the O-ring into this pump. You can see very clearly that O-ring does not stick up over that flange. See if I can get a good shot of this. Focus. The fact that this thing is kind of all like out around on this and not giving a good even seal all the way around makes me think that could be the problem right there. So I've kept my old, actually I haven't been able to sell my old pickup tube, and I thought, hey, let me go check that and make sure, maybe this one's also like out around and it's common and that's how they all are. No, no, it's not. This one is a lot more precision made, it's very, very round. You can just eyeball it and see. Anyway, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm kind of irritated. These parts are not cheap, by the way. This oil pan, it was like, I think the two of them together was like around 350 bucks. I think it was like 250, and then this thing was $90. So I mean, it's possible that this is just fine. I did pull a bearing cap off my engine and it looks great. All the bearings are tight. You know, I tried to move all of the rod bearings or I guess all of the rods, and they're all very tight, and you know, the engine is relatively low miles. I mean, it's 100,000, so that's for somebody like me, that's low miles. So I'm kind of left with this sort of problem here. I mean, I spent like, you know, almost $400 after tax and everything for this thing, so I don't exactly want to throw it in the garbage can. All right, there you go. There's my rant. Time to get to work. Ooh, took a little tumble there. I hope I didn't break the air conditioning pump there. It kind of had a long fall. Got the water pump off, and now it's time for an old friend, the old crank pulley. Luckily I have the right one this time, so I think this should go pretty quick. All right, well, I had to get the engine hoist out because the oil pan does not clear this cross member by like a little bit, by about, you know, about an inch or half an inch or so. So I had to unhook the two engine mount bolts and hoist this thing up. I do have obviously the front timing covers on, the water pumps on, we're all pretty good there. And I was just kind of checking out the oil pickup tube situation, and I think that I have found a problem. So here I have the conversion, you know, the Hemi swap, whatever, E-body, Hemi swap, oil pickup tube, and then I have just the original Durango pickup tube right here. And then here I have the factory oil pump. One thing, you know, I couldn't help but notice, the tube that goes into the oil pump is a lot longer, and I mean, I don't, you know, the flange is thicker as well, but also the Milodon one is like kind of slash cut. This kind of was just, I guess, hacked off at an angle. I mean, you know, that's probably not that big of a deal, but I noticed something about this oil pump. So the real problem is that there's two bolts that hold, you know, the pickup tubes. One down here, which is somewhere coming out of the bottom of the engine, and then this one right here. And it's going to be a little bit difficult to kind of explain this, I guess, but it's really important that these two bolts here are clocked at the right angle. So when you insert this one in, this one needs to align exactly with that other bolt. And I noticed, because I was really paying close attention, that this bolt hole here was off. So I thought a good way to test that would be to use the stock oil pickup tube, because this one has that same, you know, center bolt here, and then this thing lined up perfectly. And this thing slid right into the oil pump, no issues. So I believe that when I installed this thing the first time, it did go into the hole a little bit, but it was kind of going in, you know, instead of being like perfectly in the center, it was like down a little bit, or wherever it was off by. So I believe that the O-ring was getting smashed on like this outer ring, or just kind of really like squished up against the side. And when I tightened it down pretty tight, and these two surfaces never actually got flush with each other. But thought what I could do is trim off this sort of flange here, and then cut this flange right there, and actually just re-weld this flange onto this pipe here. All right, engine's back together. Everything's plugged back in. Let's see where we're at. Bring up my gauges there. Look at that. Woo! We got 58, 59 PSI right there. Our temperature is 184. That's our coolant temp. We have awesome oil pressure. So I think I want to put on the hood today. This is going to be the day where I see if all of this stuff fits, and the throttle body I'm pretty confident will fit. The air cleaner actually does stick up quite a bit, and the hood does slope down a little bit, of course. Just the whole car's line comes down like this. So the further forward stuff is, the more at risk I am of hitting. And actually these AC lines are kind of a little bit suspect right now. Here, we'll see if we can get a level. So that's exciting. I'm happy to get this hood on. First, we got to get that big old heavy guy up on here. All right, success. There's many hours of hood adjustments, but it's good now. And I have shut it, and it does not seem like anything is hitting in there. I think it gets pretty close. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my phone here, and then I'm going to shut the hood, and we'll see how close it gets. Awesome. Well, all right, I just checked back at that video I took, and it looks like we're good. I was kind of hoping that the air cleaner would end up in a good spot here to kind of give it a, I don't know if I'd call it exactly a ram air effect, but some fresh air right into the air cleaner. And sure enough, I don't know, you can't really see it, but let's see if we can get in there. Awesome. It worked out pretty good. It's good to have this hood on. It's been a long time, and I'm really excited to see it kind of looking finished finally. All right, well, it's dyno day number 2. This is attempts number 2 anyway. And since the tuner was able to actually get what he said was a decent idle tune, and even a little bit of a sort of mid-range tune last time, he said they were pretty much close enough that if it drives around the block okay, then I'm probably good to drive it down there. So I think I'm gonna give it a shot. I think I'm just gonna drive this guy under its own power. So this thing made 371 wheel horsepower and 377 foot-pounds of torque, which is awesome. I'm really happy with that number. You know, it's not a crazy, you know, big number. I know you can buy a crate engine that has like 700 horsepower or whatever, but for this, you know, old donor engine, which I got almost for free after parting out all the Durango parts, you know, I ended up getting basically the motor for like $200. Obviously, that's a measurement, not at the crank, because usually when you get the factory ratings, that's a measure of the engine at the crank, because that number is a lot higher. You can account for around like 15% of horsepower lost through a rear-wheel drive drivetrain. So to kind of compare it to a horsepower rating, you'll see from the manufacturer, this thing should have around like over 400, around like 430 or something like that, which is awesome because the Durango, I think for 05, the car itself was rated at 345 horsepower. And I made more at the wheels. So, you know, considering that if I'm around 430 crank horsepower, that means I picked up around maybe like around 70 or 80 horsepower with my cam swap and with the headers and with all of the extras. So yeah, I'm very happy with that number. And I can tell you this car has some, definitely has some get up. You know, I didn't stomp on it too hard on the way home, but I definitely did give it a little bit of gas. So that's the last thing before I start putting some miles on this thing and, you know, doing some shakedown tests, because I'm actually planning a very long road trip with this thing. I'm going to drive this thing to Seattle, which is, from where I'm at, it's about 1,100 miles away. One thing I'm going to do in Seattle is I'm actually going to drag race it. I have some family up there and they have some hot rods as well. So I'm going to take this thing to a 1/4 mile track up there and I'm going to see what kind of times I can run.